you've heard about near-death experiences, I imagine, you know, the idea that people see the light at the end of the tunnel, and then, you know, when they get through the light, they see all their ancestors there, and something that vaguely resembles God, and, you know, and that's conditioned to some degree by their cultural background. But it's a very common experience, and this is actually a representation of that from a 12th to 13th century painting by Hieronymus Bosch. And this seems to be the sort of thing also that's characteristic of the shamanic experience post-reduction to skeleton. So the shaman dies, and then as a consequence of that, he ends up in a space that's characterized by the presence of the ancestral spirits, whatever that means. I mean, you could think about those as, like, each of you are embodiments of ancestral spirits, right? Because all the ideas you have, for example, none of them are your ideas, or virtually none of them. It's almost impossible to have an original idea. All the ideas you have are like the ghostly remnants of brilliant philosophers or theologians who've lived, you know, hundreds or thousands of years ago, and your whole head is populated by these things. And they're sort of embodied things because they tell you how to act. You know, they're not just cold, dead ideas. And you know, you're a mixture of all those things. And I don't know if the ancestral spirits that these visionaries encounter are like personified representations of the spirits that live inside their head, or what they are. But part of the experience seems to be, what would you call it? It's like a rescuing of the dying father from the depths. How many of you have seen Pinocchio? Right, so you know the fundamental theme there, right? Pinocchio is a marionette, so anyone can manipulate him. And he's a wooden head, he's not awake, he's not conscious, he's not alive. And so he can be led astray in 15 different ways. And, you know, finally his father disappears to go looking for him. And for reasons that aren't exactly clear, his father ends up inside a whale at the bottom of the ocean, which is, you know, not the first place you'd think of looking for your father. But especially if you were a puppet, and you know, like a cricket was leading you around, which is all absurd stuff. You know? Although one thing I could tell you is, what's the cricket's name? Yeah, what's the initials? Right, so fake, right? Yeah, Jiminy Cricket is Southern U.S. slang for Jesus Christ. And, you know, the animators picked that up as a joke. But it's not a joke, because of course the cricket serves as the conscience and the spiritual guide on this quest vision. And it's the cricket that leads the puppet deep underground. Actually, it's into the ocean, to the deepest depths of despair, right? And death, like a shamanic disintegration, to find the spirit of his father. And why does he need that? Well, it's because without incorporating the spirit of his father or his forefathers, he can't be real. And that's because human beings, and puppets apparently, you know, we're cultural creatures. It's not like there's you and there's your culture. It's like you are your culture. And so you're either the embodiment of your culture, fleshed out and made whole, or you're just a fragmentary thing and you're only half alive. And worse than that, you can't cope with tragedy. I mean, the way that Pinocchio becomes real is he rescues his father from the whale, which is also a dragon, right? The whale's a dragon. How do you know that? What happens to the whale? He spits fire. Yeah, it's weird behavior for a whale, you know, and it's because Pinocchio lights a fire inside him. But of course, you know, that's how human beings have always escaped from chaos, is by using fire. So he's the master of fire, and that brings him up from the depths, and he has to rescue his father, and it actually kills him, right? His father says, no, let me drown, save yourself. And Pinocchio doesn't, and he dies in the effort to bring him to shore. But then comes down and says, well, because you're such a good puppet, you know, it's like, great, now you're awake. You know, it's a remarkable story. It's an amazing movie. I mean, it has themes in it that are thousands and thousands of years old. Like the idea that the hero has to journey to the darkest depths to reclaim a treasure. The treasure can be lots of things. It can be the dead father. It can be a princess. It can be gold. It doesn't really matter. There's this idea that, you know, the thing you want most is to be found where you least want to look, which is a lovely little That's an alchemical dictum, by the way, that was sort of reanimated by Jung. So anyways, the idea in the shamanic visions is that past death, there's this opening up into the ancestral landscape, and that's the place where you can commune with, well, the ancestor gods, or maybe the spirit of the ancestors themselves, which is something like God. You know, if you look at the Christian representations, for example, one of the elements of God is God the Father. And so God the Father is sort of like an amalgam of all great fathers of the past. You know, because you might say, well, what makes a person a great father? Well, careful, devoted attention would be part of it, right? That's a transpersonal thing. It's like if you're a great father, and you are too, there's something about both of your actions as a great father that are the same. And you can think of that as the spirit of the great father. And you know, that sort of shines through individuals. And so that's a way of communing with God through the ancestors. And that's part of what these rituals are about.